All right, welcome to day 23, Obadiah all the way to Malachi. Man, you're finishing the Old Testament. You're a freak. You did it. You didn't think you could do it. Here we go. So as we're finishing the Old Testament, we've got this mixed bag of short prophetic books called the minor prophets, but there's nothing minor about these dudes at all. These guys are ministering mostly during kind of like the time when, excepting Jonah, and we'll talk about Jonah in a second, but most of these guys are ministering during a time when Israel's kind of coming back, and they're trying to figure life out, and they're prophets that are ministering to the rebuilding people. And so, but let's take a look at Jonah. The big idea of Jonah, and I'm stealing this from Tim Keller, the big idea of Jonah is that Jonah isn't necessarily the one saving Nineveh. It's not the story about Jonah saving Nineveh. It's the story about God saving Jonah. Jonah is what Tim Keller calls the runaway prophet. And God's like, go to Nineveh. He hates Nineveh. Nineveh is his mortal enemy. And so he literally goes the opposite way of where God tells him to go. And then God's like, yeah, it's not going to work. And it's just one of those funny things where the means is redemptive, meaning that what God calls you to is actually saving you, and doing what God's called you to do and staying in the will of God is what's saving you as well. And so Jonah's got this story where I need you to be a prophet. And he's like, well, I don't feel like a prophet. In fact, what you're calling me to, I'm running away from. Like, well, yeah, but when you're being a prophet, when you're doing what I'm calling, it's actually saving you. It's a crazy story. Jonah knew that God would show mercy to Nineveh, and that's why he didn't want to go, because he knew that God's kind and he's merciful and he's slow to anger. And Nineveh was the absolute worst. It was the capital of the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians were awful. They'd stack the skulls of all the people that they killed outside the walls of Nineveh. It was wild.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying this thread, but I wanted to take a moment to tell you about Theos Seminary, where we offer certificates, bachelor's, and master's in biblical studies, and all at a really low price point, because we believe that you should be able to get a Bible degree without breaking the bank. In fact, our certificate programs are $999, and our bachelor's and master's start at $99 a month. Our program is subscription-based, which means you can pause and stop at any time, because we know that life happens. And perhaps my favorite part is the fact that we have an incredible student life community where our students get sorted into 4 houses. It's so much fun. We have competitions, in-person meetups, online events, student unions. It's phenomenal. So we would love to have you a part of that community. If you're at all interested, shoot me an email before February 1st. I will waive your enrollment fee. It's Brittany@theosseminary.com. I would love to meet you, answer any questions that you might have, and we would be so honored to have you at Theos Seminary. Come join us.
The last 3 books of this reading section are my favorites because they're building books. So you got Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, and they're all, once again, ministering to the returning exiles that are rebuilding Jerusalem from the ashes. And so they're kind of like the ones fresh on the scene after the tornado hits and just has caused total carnage. And then you've got Amos. Amos is the guy who wants justice to roll down like he's the all the Amos, the picket signs, the Christian picket signs. The wokes love Amos. I mean, I love Amos too. But people love to take passages of Amos right out of their context, like, I hate your music services. It's not Yahweh speaking about Yahweh worship. It's Yahweh speaking about their idol worship and their intermingling of their idol worship with the Yahweh cult. And God's like, all of these feasts that you keep, you're literally idolaters. So I hate the sound of your worship. Let justice roll down like a river, meaning like return to the law. Amos you can kind of manipulate, but Malachi you can't, which is why Malachi is my favorite prophet, because he's just too specific about what justice is. He's quoting the law. I love the conversation that Malachi opens up. God's like, I've loved you. And they're like, how have you loved us? And God's like, I rejected everybody, and I chose you. And then he gets into the specifics, and these people are like sacrificing blind animals and giving God trash, and they're completely disobeying the law. And so Malachi goes around and just beats them up. It's really, really great theology. And when you read the New Testament and you have Malachi in mind, you're like, wow, Paul's pulling a lot from here. Anyways, these are really great books. And as you're reading them, my thought is like, see the prophetic scope of this word. You can see how like God is like, the New Testament church would be reading these prophets that are writing to the exiles come to rebuild, and you can see that there's a fulfilling word that is happening in the nation, but it's also happening in the church, and you can see that like God's purposes are they're coming to fruition. They're coming into a reality for this Israel that's returning, and they're building and they're honoring the Lord, and they're having to learn worship again, and they're having to learn covenant fidelity and what that looks like. But you can also see that these books would be just so bang on for the New Testament church as well.